Hey guys, tonight we're taking a delicious detour through the smoky, chaotic streets of ancient Rome, where the air is thick with the scent of honey-drizzled pastries, fermented fish sauce, and roasting meat. You're about to discover that Romans didn't just conquer the world, they basically invented the concept of grabbing a quick bite on the go. Picture this. You're walking down the Via Appia, dodging horse-drawn carts, and trying not to step in something unmentionable, when suddenly your stomach growls louder than a gladiator's battle cry. Lucky for you, you're in the world's first true fast food paradise, where every street corner offers something to munch on. And trust me, you probably won't survive this culinary adventure without gaining at least 10 pounds and questioning everything you thought you knew about ancient diets. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. While you're at it, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how this ancient world connects us across modern time zones. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into the Forum Romanum at dawn, and already the food vendors are setting up their stalls. The Romans had a word for these enterprising souls: pistors for bakers, popinarii for tavern keepers, and lixi for the general street food sellers who followed armies and crowds alike. The smell hits you first, a complex mixture of baking bread, bubbling oil, and something vaguely fishy that you'll later learn is garum, Rome's beloved fermented fish sauce that they put on absolutely everything. Historians still argue whether garum was more like ancient ketchup or ancient Worcestershire sauce, but everyone agrees it was Rome's first condiment obsession. These street vendors weren't just feeding people, they were feeding an empire. Rome's population swelled to over 1 million residents by the 1st century CE, making it the largest city in the ancient world. Most of these people lived in cramped apartment buildings called insulae, often without proper kitchens. Cooking fires were dangerous in these wooden structures, so eating out wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. The government even provided free grain rations called the annona to keep the masses fed, and more importantly, happy. Because nothing says, "Don't revolt," quite like a full belly. You watch as a baker pulls fresh panis quadratus from his oven, those distinctively scored round loaves that archaeologists have found perfectly preserved in Pompeii. But this isn't just bread, it's the foundation of Roman fast food. Vendors would slice these loaves and stuff them with whatever was available: cheese, olives, honey, or even leftover meat. It's basically the world's first sandwich, though calling it that would probably get you some strange looks from the locals. The morning crowd is already forming, and you notice something fascinating. Romans eat standing up. There are no tables, no chairs, just people clustered around stalls, juggling hot food and trying not to burn their fingers. A toga-clad customer next to you is attempting to eat what looks like a honey-soaked pastry while maintaining his dignity and failing spectacularly. Some things about fast food never change. You spot a vendor selling libum, small cheesecakes that were originally offered to the gods, but have clearly made their way into everyday snacking. These little round cakes are made with cheese, honey, and flour, then baked until golden. They're Rome's answer to the donut, and judging by how quickly they're disappearing from the vendor's tray, they're just as addictive. The vendor catches your eye and holds up 2 fingers, 2 asses, the small copper coins that most street food cost. You hand over your coins and bite into heaven. But it's not just sweets dominating the scene. Another stall is serving malsum, a mixture of wine and honey that Romans drink at any hour of the day. The vendor dips a ladle into a large ceramic jar and pours the golden liquid into a clay cup. You take a sip and understand immediately why Romans conquered half the known world. They were probably too buzzed to realize how crazy their military campaigns were. The sweet wine warms your throat and makes the bustling street seem a little more manageable. As the morning progresses, more exotic offerings appear. You see a vendor selling roasted chickpeas sprinkled with salt and mysterious spices. Another is hawking malsum mixed with spices from the far reaches of the empire, cinnamon from Ceylon, pepper from India, ginger from China. This isn't just food, it's an edible map of Roman conquest. Every flavor tells the story of a trade route, a conquered territory, a cultural exchange that happened at the tip of a sword. The most adventurous vendor has set up near the basilica with something called ovomelita, eggs cooked in honey. You watch as he cracks fresh eggs into a pan already bubbling with golden honey, creating what might be the world's most confusing breakfast food. The result looks like something between scrambled eggs and candy, and the line of customers suggests you're not the only one curious enough to try it. By midday, the streets have transformed into a full-scale food festival, and you're beginning to understand that Roman junk food wasn't just about satisfying hunger. It was about creating community, displaying wealth, and experiencing the flavors of an empire that stretched from Britain to Egypt. You duck into a thermopolium as the midday sun beats down mercilessly on the Roman streets, and immediately you're struck by how familiar this scene feels. The marble counter stretches along one wall, punctuated by large ceramic jars called dolia that are sunk into the surface to keep food warm. Steam rises from these ancient hot wells, carrying the scent of stewed beans, barley porridge, and something that might be an early version of soup. This is Rome's answer to the modern fast food restaurant, and it's doing a booming business. The proprietor, a freed slave named Marcus, who clearly knows his way around both a ledger and a ladle, greets you with the practiced smile of someone who served thousands of hungry Romans. Behind him, painted frescoes advertise the day's offerings, a menu board 2,000 years before McDonald's thought of the concept. You can make out images of fish, fowl, and various preparations that look suspiciously like the ancestor of modern Italian cuisine. Historians still argue whether these thermopolia were primarily taverns or restaurants, but the evidence suggests they were both, serving as neighborhood social hubs where food and gossip flowed equally freely. The setup is ingenious in its simplicity. The dolia keep food at serving temperature without requiring constant fuel, and the marble counter provides a clean, cool surface for preparation. You watch Marcus ladle a portion of pools, a thick porridge made from grains, into a wooden bowl. This isn't glamorous food, but it's hot, filling, and cheap, exactly what the average Roman worker needs to get through the day. A construction worker next to you is eating his pools with a piece of bread, creating what might be the world's first carb-on-carb combination meal. But the thermopolia aren't just serving peasant food. You notice a well-dressed merchant ordering gustaccio, a selection of appetizers that includes olives, cheese, and small sausages. This is the Roman equivalent of ordering the deluxe combo, and it comes with its own social status. The merchant eats standing at the counter, but his refined manner of handling the food, pinching olives delicately, savoring the cheese, marks him as someone who normally dines in more elegant surroundings. The efficiency of the operation is remarkable. Marcus and his assistant move with practiced precision, serving customers in a steady rhythm that would make modern fast food managers weep with envy. Orders are filled quickly, coins change hands, and the turnover is constant. You realize that this system was feeding thousands of people daily across Rome, making it possibly the world's first fast food franchise operation. Pompeii alone had over 150 thermopolia, suggesting that even smaller Roman cities were thoroughly dependent on this takeout culture. You order something called conditum paradoxum, a spiced wine mixture that's served warm from one of the dolia. The first sip reveals layers of flavor: honey, pepper, bay leaves, and something else you can't identify. Marcus notices your puzzled expression and grins, explaining in Latin that the secret ingredient is dates, imported from North Africa and mashed into the wine. This isn't just a drink. It's a liquid advertisement for Roman trade networks, a reminder that the empire's reach extended far beyond its military might. The social dynamics of the thermopolium fascinate you. A senator's slave stands next to a freedman baker, both eating the same stewed lentils, and engaged in animated conversation about chariot races. Class distinctions that dominate Roman society elsewhere seem to blur here, replaced by the universal democracy of hunger and the shared experience of grabbing a quick meal. The slave is even offering racing tips to the baker, creating a moment of connection that wouldn't be possible in more formal settings. As the afternoon crowd builds, you notice the thermopolium's role as an information hub. Customers linger over their food, sharing news, gossip, and business deals. A wine merchant is negotiating with a tavern owner, using the back of a bread loaf as a makeshift contract tablet. Two women are discussing the latest gladiatorial games while sharing a plate of cheese and olives. This isn't just fast food, it's social media, Roman style. The variety of offerings expands as the day progresses. You see Marcus preparing mulsum with fresh herbs, pasca for the working class customers who can't afford wine, and even some exotic dishes that feature ingredients from the far corners of the empire. A tray of what look like ancient empanadas, pastries filled with meat and vegetables, appears from the kitchen, and they're gone within minutes. But But perhaps most impressive is the thermopolium's role in preserving and spreading culinary traditions. You overhear Marcus explaining to a young apprentice how to properly prepare garum, the fermented fish sauce that's become Rome's signature condiment. He's passing down recipes that have traveled from Greece, Egypt, and Gaul, creating a fusion cuisine that reflects the empire's cultural diversity. This isn't just food service, it's cultural preservation in action. By evening, as the thermopolium begins to wind down, you realize you've witnessed something extraordinary, the birth of the restaurant industry, complete with standardized recipes, efficient service, and social networking, all wrapped up in the simple act of grabbing a quick bite. You follow the intoxicating scent of honey and baking dough to a corner stall where an elderly woman is pulling golden pastries from a small clay oven, and your mouth starts watering before you even know what you're looking at. This is Rome's dessert district, and the Romans, it turns out, had a sweet tooth that would make modern candy manufacturers jealous. The woman, whose weathered hands move with the precision of decades of practice, is creating libum, small round cakes made with fresh cheese, honey, and flour that were originally sacred offerings to the gods, but have found their way into everyday Roman snacking. She hands you one still warm from the oven, and you understand immediately why the gods supposedly loved these. The texture is somewhere between cheesecake and pound cake, while the honey provides a sweetness that's complex and floral rather than cloying. This isn't just dessert, it's a religious experience that's been democratized for the masses. You watch as she drizzles more honey over the top, creating golden rivulets that catch the afternoon light. It's Rome's answer to the glazed donut, and it's absolutely perfect. But libum is just the beginning of your sweet journey. At the next stall, a young man is frying globi, small balls of dough that puff up in hot oil like ancient donut holes. He pulls them from the oil with a bronze strainer, tosses them in honey, and then rolls them in poppy seeds imported from the eastern provinces. The result is a sticky, crunchy confection that requires serious commitment to eat without making a mess. The vendor catches your eye and demonstrates the proper technique. Pop the whole thing in your mouth at once, chew quickly, and try not to think about your toga. Some Roman fashion problems apparently had no solutions. Historians still argue whether Romans actually invented the concept of the dessert course or simply perfected it. But the evidence suggests they were the first civilization to systematically develop sweet foods as a distinct category. The wealthy had their elaborate secondi mensae, but these street vendors were democratizing sugar for the masses. A construction worker next to you is carefully eating a honey-soaked pastry while trying to keep mortar dust off his food, proving that the human desire for dessert transcends both class and practicality. You spot another vendor selling mulsum with ova melita, eggs cooked in honey that create a custard-like texture. This is Rome's attempt at ice cream, served at room temperature and twice as sticky. The vendor explains that the eggs come from quails rather than chickens, making this a premium dessert option. You try a spoonful and discover flavors that your modern palate struggles to categorize. It's simultaneously breakfast and dessert, familiar and completely alien. The honey trade that makes all this sweetness possible is a marvel of ancient commerce. You learn from a chatty vendor that Roman honey comes from everywhere: Attica for the finest quality, Sardinia for everyday use, and Spain for the stuff that goes into cooking. The best honey, he explains while gesturing dramatically, comes from Mount Hymettus in Greece, where the bees feast on thyme and wild herbs. This honey is so prized that it's literally worth its weight in silver, making your simple pastry a luxury item that would bankrupt a medieval peasant. But the real revelation comes when you encounter placenta, a layered pastry that's Rome's answer to baklava. The vendor is assembling one as you watch, carefully brushing each thin layer of dough with honey and sprinkling in cheese and nuts. The finished product looks like edible architecture, with golden layers that catch the light like stained glass. She cuts you a piece, and the first bite reveals why this dessert was considered fit for gods and emperors. The honey has been infused with bay leaves, giving it an aromatic complexity that elevates the entire experience. As the afternoon progresses, you discover that Roman sweet treats serve multiple purposes beyond mere indulgence. Children are given honey cakes to soothe teething pain. Athletes consume honey-based energy foods before competitions, and lovers exchange sweets as symbols of affection. A young couple nearby is sharing a single honey pastry, feeding each other bites in a display of romance that transcends the centuries. Some things about human nature apparently never change. The spice trade adds another layer of complexity to Roman desserts. You try a pastry flavored with cinnamon from Ceylon, another with piper from India, and a third with zingber from China. Each bite is a reminder of Rome's global reach, an edible map of trade routes that stretch from Britain to the Indian Ocean. The vendors take pride in their exotic ingredients, explaining the origins of each spice with the enthusiasm of travel guides. Your sweet exploration culminates with savillum, a type of cheesecake that's been perfected in Rome's kitchens. This version is lighter than modern cheesecake, made with fresh cheese and honey, then baked until golden. The vendor tells you it's traditionally served at weddings and festivals, but he's found a steady market among everyday Romans who want a taste of celebration in their ordinary lives. You eat yours slowly, savoring the way the honey and cheese complement each other, understanding why Romans considered this dessert worthy of their most important occasions. As evening approaches and the dessert vendors begin packing up their wares, you realize you've experienced something profound, the birth of dessert culture, where sweetness became not just a luxury, but a daily pleasure accessible to everyone from slaves to senators. You wander into Rome's equivalent of a convenience store, and your eyes immediately go to the baskets of roasted chickpeas, nuts, and seeds that line the walls like ancient trail mix. The vendor, a grizzled former soldier who's clearly found his calling in the snack business, hands you a small cloth pouch filled with what he calls cicer frictum, roasted chickpeas that have been tossed with salt and garum, Rome's beloved fermented fish sauce. You pop one in your mouth and discover a flavor profile that's both familiar and completely foreign, like someone took modern bar nuts and transported them through a time machine via fish sauce. The Romans, it turns out, were absolute masters of the salty snack game. These aren't just random nibbles, they're carefully crafted flavor experiences designed to be portable, durable, and addictive. The chickpeas have been roasted until they're perfectly crunchy, then seasoned with a mixture that includes not just salt and garum, but also cumin, coriander, and a mysterious spice that the vendor claims comes from the lands beyond India. Each bite delivers multiple waves of flavor: the initial salt hit, the umami depth of the fermented fish sauce, and then the warming spices that linger on your tongue. But chickpeas are just the beginning of your salty journey. The vendor produces a bowl of Noose's walnuts that have been roasted with honey and salt, creating a sweet-salty combination that modern snack food scientists spend millions trying to perfect. Next to them are amygdala almonds that have been soaked in wine, then dried and salted, giving them a complex flavor that hints at the sophistication of Roman palates. Historians still argue whether Romans invented the concept of bar snacks or simply perfected them, but the evidence suggests they understood the relationship between salt, alcohol, and social bonding better than most modern civilizations. You notice that every snack comes with its own social context. The roasted chickpeas are popular with laborers and soldiers, portable protein that could survive a long day of construction work or military campaigns. The honeyed nuts are favored by merchants and middle-class Romans who can afford the luxury of sweet-salty combinations. The wine-soaked almonds are clearly for the wealthy, a sophisticated snack that demonstrates both refined taste and disposable income. Even in ancient Rome, apparently, you are what you eat. The vendor explains that most Romans carry these snacks in small leather pouches, eating them throughout the day to stave off hunger between meals. It's the ancient equivalent of keeping granola bars in your desk drawer, except these snacks were designed to complement wine consumption rather than replace meals. A group of young men nearby is sharing a pouch of spiced nuts while passing around a jug of Posca, the sour wine that's become Rome's everyday beverage. Their animated conversation suggests that salty snacks serve the same social lubricating function they do today. You try something called sale candida, literally seasoned salt, that's been mixed with herbs and spices to create a dipping powder for bread, cheese, or vegetables. The vendor demonstrates by tearing off a piece of bread and dipping it in the mixture, creating an instant flavor explosion that makes plain bread taste like gourmet cuisine. This isn't just salt, it's a flavor delivery system that transforms simple ingredients into complex experiences. The mixture includes salt, piper, pepper, cumin, and silphium, the legendary spice from North Africa that was supposedly worth more than gold. The economics of Roman snacking fascinate you. These aren't expensive luxuries. They're everyday items priced for regular consumption. A handful of roasted chickpeas costs one as about the same as a cup of pasca. The vendor explains that he buys his chickpeas from farmers outside the city, roasts them himself, and sells them with a markup that allows him to support his family. It's a simple business model that's feeding thousands of Romans daily while providing a decent living for small entrepreneurs. As the afternoon progresses, you discover more exotic offerings. There are olivi candidi, olives that have been cured in wine and spices, creating a snack that combines the Mediterranean's favorite fruit with Rome's favorite flavoring agents. The vendor has several varieties, some cured with defrutum grape syrup, others with garum, and a premium version that's been aged in mulsum, honeyed wine. Each type offers a different flavor profile, from sweet and wine-forward to umami-rich and complex. The most adventurous snack turns out to be salsamentum, small pieces of salted fish that have been dried and seasoned with spices. This is Rome's answer to modern beef jerky, except it's made with fish and designed to be eaten with wine rather than as a standalone protein source. The texture is chewy, the flavor is intensely salty and fishy, and the spice blend includes ingredients that your modern palate can't quite identify. The vendor explains that this particular batch was made with fish from the Black Sea, preserved with salt from Spain, and spiced with herbs from Gaul. It's a snack that literally tastes like the Roman Empire. Your salty snack exploration concludes with mortem, a spreadable mixture of cheese, herbs, and garum that's designed to be eaten with bread or vegetables. The vendor mixes it fresh as you watch, combining soft cheese with chopped herbs, salt, and a generous splash of fish sauce. The result is something like ancient pesto, but with a umami depth that modern Italian cuisine can't quite match. You spread it on a piece of bread and understand immediately why Romans considered this the perfect afternoon snack. It's portable, flavorful, and substantial enough to tide you over until dinner. You stumble into what can only be described as Rome's answer to happy hour, and immediately you're handed a cup of mulsum by a vendor who clearly believes that wine should be consumed at all hours of the day. This isn't just any wine, it's honey wine, a mixture of venom and mel that's been carefully balanced to create something that's both intoxicating and surprisingly refreshing. The first sip reveals layers of complexity. The dry bite of fermented grapes, the floral sweetness of honey, and subtle spice notes that suggest this particular batch has been enhanced with cinnamomum or piper. You're beginning to understand why Romans conquered half the known world. They were probably too buzzed to realize how insane their ambitions were. The vendor, a cheerful freedman named Gaius, who's clearly passionate about his craft, explains that mulsum is just the beginning of Rome's alcoholic beverage empire. He produces a cup of conditum paradoxum, a spiced wine mixture that contains honey, pepper, bay leaves, dates, and a mysterious ingredient he calls laser, the legendary silphium from North Africa that was supposedly worth more than gold. One sip and you understand the hype. This isn't just wine. It's a liquid spice rack that delivers wave after wave of complex flavors, each one revealing new depths as your palate adjusts. But the real revelation comes when Gaius introduces you to Posca, the sour wine that's become Rome's everyday beverage. This isn't wine that's gone bad. It's intentionally soured wine mixed with water, herbs, and sometimes honey to create something that's part beverage, part medicine, and part social lubricant. Roman soldiers drink it, workers depend on it, and even some wealthy Romans prefer it to the expensive imported wines. The flavor is tart and refreshing, with an acidity that cuts through the richness of Roman food, and a low alcohol content that allows for all-day consumption without complete intoxication. Historians still argue whether Romans invented the concept of the cocktail or simply perfected it, but the evidence suggests they understood the relationship between alcohol, flavor, and social bonding better than most modern civilizations. You watch as Gaius mixes different wine combinations for different customers. Balsam for the wealthy merchant who wants to impress his friends. Posca for the construction workers who need something refreshing, but not too strong. And a special mixture of wine and garum for the customer who apparently enjoys his beverages with a umami kick. The food pairings are just as sophisticated as the beverages. Gaius offers you a piece of bread that's been soaked in balsam, and then topped with cheese and honey, essentially Rome's answer to wine-poached pears, but in sandwich form. The bread absorbs the wine's flavors while maintaining its texture, creating a snack that's both substantial and intoxicating. You eat it slowly, savoring the way the honey and cheese complement the wine's complexity. Understanding why Romans considered this combination worthy of their most important social gatherings. As the afternoon progresses, you discover that Roman drinking culture serves multiple purposes beyond mere intoxication. The symposium tradition, borrowed from the Greeks, but thoroughly Romanized, combines intellectual conversation, food, and carefully measured alcohol consumption. You watch as a group of young Romans shares a jug of conditum paradoxum, taking turns discussing philosophy, politics, and poetry while nibbling on wine-soaked bread and honey cakes. The alcohol loosens tongues without destroying judgment, creating a social environment where ideas flow as freely as wine. The economics of Roman drinking fascinate you. These aren't expensive luxuries. They're everyday items priced for regular consumption. A cup of Posca costs one as about the same as a handful of roasted chickpeas. Balsam is slightly more expensive, but still within reach of most Romans. The truly expensive beverages, wine aged in amphorae, exotic spiced mixtures, imported vintages from Gaul or Greece, are reserved for special occasions or wealthy patrons who want to display their status through their beverage choices. But perhaps most impressive is the variety of wine-based snacks. Gaius shows you ova melita that have been prepared with wine instead of water, creating custard-like treats that combine the richness of eggs with the complexity of fermented grapes. He offers you placenta that's been brushed with spiced wine between layers, creating a dessert that's simultaneously sweet, alcoholic, and aromatic. Even the simple libum cakes taste different when paired with balsam. The honey in both the cake and the wine creating harmonious flavors that enhance each other. The social dynamics of Roman drinking culture reveal themselves as the evening approaches. You notice that different beverages mark different social classes. Slaves drink pasca or water, freedmen enjoy balsam, and wealthy citizens sip imported wines from expensive glass vessels. But the thermopolium creates a democratic space where these distinctions blur. A senator's slave stands next to a successful merchant, both drinking pasca and discussing chariot races with equal enthusiasm. Alcohol, apparently, has always been the great social equalizer. Your boozy exploration concludes with vinum conditum, a mulled wine that's been heated with spices and honey to create something that's part beverage, part medicine, and part comfort food. Gaius explains that this particular version contains Zingiber ginger from China, piper pepper from India, and cinnamomum, cinnamon from Ceylon, making it a liquid map of Roman trade routes. You sip it slowly, feeling the warmth spread through your chest, understanding why Romans considered this the perfect ending to a day of eating, drinking, and socializing in the ancient world's first fast food culture. You enter a spice merchant's stall near the Forum Boreum, and immediately your senses are assaulted by aromas that seem to come from the ends of the earth. Cinnamon from Ceylon, pepper from India, ginger from China, and something called silphium from North Africa that smells like a mixture of garlic and heaven. The merchant, a weathered man whose hands are permanently stained with turmeric, and whose eyes hold the wisdom of someone who spent decades turning exotic plants into culinary gold, greets you with a knowing smile. He understands that you're about to experience something that will fundamentally change your understanding of Roman cuisine, the moment when simple street food becomes an edible map of the known world. He starts with piper, black pepper from India's Malabar coast, and explains that this small, wrinkled seed is literally worth its weight in silver. Romans don't just use pepper as a seasoning. They use it as currency, medicine, and status symbol. The merchant demonstrates by grinding a few peppercorns with a small bronze mortar and pestle, releasing an aroma that's simultaneously hot, woody, and floral. He sprinkles the ground pepper over a piece of bread drizzled with honey, creating a flavor combination that makes your taste buds sit up and pay attention. This isn't just seasoning, it's a flavor revolution that's transforming Roman palates from simple to sophisticated. But pepper is just the beginning of your spice journey. The merchant produces a small leather pouch containing cinnamomum, cinnamon bark from Ceylon, that arrives in Rome via a trade route so complex and dangerous that most Romans believe it's harvested by giant birds in Arabia. The reality, he explains with a conspiratorial whisper, is even more exotic. It comes from an island beyond India, transported by sailors who risk their lives crossing monsoon-tossed seas. He scrapes a small amount of the bark into a cup of balsam, creating a beverage that tastes like liquid luxury and smells like paradise. Historians still argue whether the spice trade created Roman cuisine or simply enhanced it, but the evidence suggests that exotic seasonings fundamentally changed how Romans thought about food. Before the spice trade, Roman cuisine was simple, hearty, and local. After, it became complex, sophisticated, and global. You watch as the merchant prepares conditum paradoxum, a spiced wine that contains not just pepper and cinnamon, but also laser, silphium, costum, an aromatic root from India, and nardus spikenard from the Himalayas. Each ingredient represents a different trade route, a different risk, a different cultural exchange. The economics of the spice trade are staggering. The merchant explains that a single pound of black pepper costs as much as a skilled craftsman earns in a week, while silphium is so valuable that the Roman government maintains strategic reserves like modern nations stockpile oil. Yet these spices are appearing in street food, creating a democratization of luxury that would have been unimaginable just a generation earlier. A construction worker next to you is eating bread seasoned with pepper and garum, consuming spices that would bankrupt a medieval king, while considering it a normal lunch. You discover that Roman spice use follows sophisticated principles that modern chefs are only beginning to understand. The merchant shows you how cumin enhances the flavor of garum without overwhelming it, how coriander balances the richness of cheese, and how a pinch of ginger can transform ordinary wine into something extraordinary. These aren't random combinations. They're the result of centuries of culinary experimentation by cultures across the Roman Empire. Knowledge that's been collected, refined, and disseminated through the empire's vast trade networks. The most exotic spice turns out to be laser, the legendary silphium from North Africa that was supposedly worth more than gold. The merchant handles it with reverence, explaining that it comes from a single region in Libya and cannot be cultivated elsewhere. The plant is so valuable that it's being harvested to extinction, making each pinch a precious commodity. He adds a tiny amount to a cup of wine, creating a flavor that's impossible to describe, simultaneously bitter, sweet, pungent, and aromatic. You understand immediately why Romans considered this the ultimate luxury ingredient. As the afternoon progresses, you learn that spices serve multiple purposes beyond flavoring food. They're used as medicine, gingerbread for stomach ailments, piper for respiratory problems, cinnamomum for digestive issues. They're used as preservatives, helping food last longer in Rome's Mediterranean climate. They're used as status symbols, allowing wealthy Romans to display their sophistication and global connections. And they're used as cultural bridges, connecting Roman palates to the cuisines of Greece, Egypt, Persia, and India. The social impact of the spice trade reveals itself as you watch customers make their selections. Wealthy Romans buy spices by the pound, planning elaborate dinner parties where exotic seasonings will demonstrate their worldliness and wealth. Middle-class Romans buy smaller quantities, adding touches of luxury to their daily meals. Even slaves and freedmen can afford tiny amounts of common spices, allowing them to participate in the empire's culinary revolution. Your spice exploration concludes with a revelation that changes everything. Most Roman street food isn't just local cuisine enhanced with exotic seasonings. It's fusion food, the result of culinary traditions from across the empire mixing and evolving in Rome's cosmopolitan environment. The garum-seasoned chickpeas you ate earlier combine Roman fermentation techniques with Middle Eastern legume preparation and Indian spice blending. The honey-wine combinations reflect Greek symposium culture, filtered through Roman practicality, and enhanced with spices from the far corners of the known world. You're not just eating snacks, you're consuming the edible history of cultural exchange, trade, and conquest. You witness the fascinating social dynamics of Roman street food as a senator's litter pauses next to a humble chickpea vendor, and you realize you're about to observe class warfare played out through culinary choices. The senator doesn't climb down from his litter. That would be beneath his dignity. But his slave does, and the transaction that follows reveals everything about Roman society's complex relationship with fast food. The slave carefully selects the finest chickpeas, pays with silver rather than copper coins, and arranges them on a clean cloth before presenting them to his master. Even junk food, apparently, comes with its own social protocols. The irony is delicious. The same roasted chickpeas that cost a construction worker, one has suddenly become an acceptable snack for the aristocracy when properly presented and paid for with expensive currency. You watch as the senator delicately eats his chickpeas while discussing important matters with his companion, treating the street food as if it were an exotic delicacy rather than working-class sustenance. The vendor plays along, describing his simple roasted legumes with the elaborate language usually reserved for imported luxuries. Class distinction, it seems, is as much about presentation as it is about actual content. But the real revelation comes when you observe how different social classes approach the same foods. The thermopolium serves identical stews to everyone, but wealthy customers eat theirs from fine ceramic bowls while standing apart from the crowd, while slaves and laborers share communal wooden bowls and eat in groups. The food is the same. The experience is completely different. A freedman merchant tries to bridge this gap by eating alone, but using a silver spoon, creating an awkward middle ground that satisfies no one and amuses everyone. Historians still argue whether Roman street food was truly democratic or simply created the illusion of equality while maintaining strict social hierarchies. But the evidence suggests both were true simultaneously. You witness a fascinating moment when a wealthy matron's slave accidentally bumps into a poor laborer while both are ordering mulsum, and the brief conversation that follows reveals how food creates temporary bridges across class lines. They discuss the quality of the honey, the origin of the wine, and the skill of the vendor with the easy familiarity of shared experience before remembering their respective social positions and returning to appropriate behavior. The vendors themselves occupy a unique position in this social ecosystem. Most are freedmen or slaves working for their masters, but their expertise gives them a form of power that transcends their legal status. You watch as a chickpea vendor politely, but firmly corrects a wealthy customer about the proper way to season his product, and the customer actually listens. In the context of food, knowledge trumps social position, creating moments of reversed authority that would be impossible in other settings. The economics of class and food reveal themselves as you observe purchasing patterns throughout the day. Morning customers tend to be laborers grabbing quick, cheap breakfasts before work pools, bread, pasca. Afternoon brings middle-class Romans seeking more elaborate snacks, honeyed pastries, spiced wine, libum cakes. Evening attracts the wealthy, who treat street food as an exotic adventure rather than a necessity. The same vendors serve all these customers, but they adjust their language, presentation, and even their recipes to match their clientele's expectations. You discover that some foods serve as social markers more than sustenance. Mulsum honeyed wine is acceptable for all classes, but the quality and presentation varies dramatically based on the customer's status. Slaves drink it from clay cups, freedmen from simple ceramic, and wealthy Romans from imported glass or silver vessels. The vendor maintains different stocks for different customers, creating a hierarchy of the same basic product that allows everyone to participate while maintaining social distinctions. The most fascinating example of food-based class warfare occurs when you observe the garum trade. This fermented fish sauce is ubiquitous in Roman cuisine, but it comes in dramatically different qualities. The cheapest version, made from fish scraps and sold to laborers, bears little resemblance to the premium garum soserum that wealthy Romans import from Spain at enormous expense. Both are technically the same product, but the price difference is astronomical, and the social implications of which version you consume are profound. As the day progresses, you notice how street food allows Romans to perform their class identity rather than simply express it. A wealthy Roman can demonstrate his sophistication by knowing the proper way to eat mulsum-soaked bread, while a freedman can display his rising status by choosing premium ingredients for his snacks. Even slaves can participate in this performance by demonstrating their masters' refined tastes when making purchases. Food becomes a stage where social positions are rehearsed, negotiated, and sometimes challenged. The most revealing moment comes when you observe a group of young aristocrats slumming in the Thermopolia, treating street food as an adventure rather than sustenance. They eat the same stews and pastries as everyone else, but their behavior, loud laughter, exaggerated reactions to spicy food, theatrical complaints about the accommodations, marks them as tourists in their own city. The regular customers watch with amused tolerance, understanding that these wealthy visitors will return to their proper dining rooms once the novelty wears off. Your exploration of food and class concludes with the realization that Roman street food didn't eliminate social hierarchies. It made them more complex and nuanced. The same foods could be democratic or exclusive, depending on how they were prepared, presented, and consumed. A simple chickpea could be working class sustenance or aristocratic delicacy, depending entirely on the social context of its consumption. You venture into Rome's nocturnal food, seen as the sun sets, and the city transforms into something entirely different. And immediately you realize that Roman nightlife revolves around food just as much as it does around entertainment. The streets that were bustling with legitimate commerce during the day now host a shadowy economy of late-night vendors, tavern keepers, and mobile food sellers who cater to Rome's insomniacs, partygoers, and night shift workers. The air is thick with smoke from torchlit cooking fires, and the mingled aromas of wine, roasted meat, and mysterious spices that seem more exotic in the flickering darkness. Your first stop is Apopina, a working-class tavern that stays open all night to serve the city's after-hours crowd. The proprietor, a burly freedman who clearly knows how to handle both difficult customers and late-night cooking, greets you with the wary friendliness of someone who's seen everything Rome's night scene has to offer. The menu at this hour is different from daytime offerings, heartier, spicier, and designed to absorb the considerable amounts of alcohol that Romans consume after dark. You order something called pulse nocturna, a nighttime porridge made with barley, beans, and enough garum to wake the dead. The clientele tells the story of Roman nightlife. You spot gladiators still wearing their practice gear, drinking pasca, and eating roasted chickpeas between training sessions. A table of actors from the nearby theater shares a jug of mulsum and a platter of honeyed pastries, their painted faces creating surreal masks in the torchlight. Near the back, a group of vigils Rome's night watchmen grab quick meals between their rounds, while prostitutes and their clients create a constant flow of customers seeking food to fuel their evening activities. This isn't just dining. It's the social infrastructure that keeps Rome functioning after dark. But the real adventure begins when you follow a mobile vendor through the winding streets of the Subura, Rome's most notorious neighborhood. This enterprising businessman has loaded his cart with portable snacks designed for nighttime consumption. Wine-soaked bread that won't dry out in the night air, honeyed nuts that provide quick energy, and small jugs of conditum paradoxum that serve as both beverage and social lubricant. He knows his route by heart, stopping at specific corners where he's built up a regular clientele of night workers, gamblers, and revelers who depend on his mobile feast. Historians still argue whether Rome's night markets were primarily legitimate businesses or fronts for less savory activities, but the evidence suggests they were both simultaneously. You watch as transactions involve not just food and money, but also information, services, and items that probably shouldn't be examined too closely in daylight. The mobile vendor serves as an informal communication network, carrying messages between different parts of the city and connecting customers who might never meet in more legitimate circumstances. The food itself is adapted for nighttime consumption in fascinating ways. Everything is designed to be eaten with one hand while moving, since most night customers are either working or heading somewhere else. Breads are cut into finger-sized portions. Stews are served in clay cups that can be discarded after use, and pastries are made extra sweet to provide quick energy for night laborers. The mobile vendor shows you his specialty: libum cakes that have been soaked in spiced wine, creating a portable dessert that's simultaneously food and drink. As the night deepens, you discover Rome's 24-hour food culture in full swing. The grain mills that supply the city's bread run all night, staffed by slaves who work in shifts to keep Rome fed. The thermopolia that close at sunset are replaced by traveling vendors who serve the same foods from portable setups. Even the spice merchants have night operations, selling exotic seasonings to tavern keepers who prepare special dishes for their after-hours clientele. Rome, you realize, never really sleeps. It just changes its dining options. The most exotic nighttime offering turns out to be vinum canditum nocturnum, a mulled wine mixture that's been enhanced with herbs, supposedly possessing aphrodisiac properties. The vendor who serves it operates from a semi-permanent stall near the Circus Maximus, catering to the post-race crowd that includes everyone from wealthy spectators to the chariot drivers themselves. The wine is served steaming hot and flavored with silphium, zingiber, and something he calls Venus's honey, that he claims comes from bees that feed exclusively on flowers sacred to the goddess of love. Whether it works as advertised is debatable, but the line of customers suggests Romans are willing to pay for the possibility. The social dynamics of nighttime dining reveal Rome's complex relationship with public order and private pleasure. The vigils tolerate the food vendors because they provide essential services, but they keep careful watch for signs that the gatherings are becoming too large or too rowdy. You witness several moments when the mere presence of food vendors helps diffuse potentially violent situations. Apparently, it's hard to start a riot when you're busy eating honey cakes. The vendors themselves serve as informal peacekeepers, refusing service to customers who seem too drunk or aggressive. Your nocturnal food exploration culminates at the Campus Martius, where a semi-permanent night market serves the city's most adventurous diners. Here you find foods that don't appear during daylight hours: exotic game meats, unusual wine mixtures, and pastries made with ingredients that are either too expensive or too controversial for daytime consumption. The vendors here cater to Rome's wealthy thrill seekers, offering culinary adventures that push the boundaries of both taste and propriety. You try something called placenta mysteriorum, a layered pastry that contains honey, cheese, and spices that create flavors you can't quite identify. served by a vendor who smiles mysteriously and refuses to reveal his recipe. You're about to discover that eating Roman street food was literally a gamble with your life. And the first warning sign comes when you notice that several vendors keep buckets of what they claim is purified water nearby, water that still looks suspiciously murky and smells faintly of sewage. The cheerful chickpea vendor who's been serving you all day casually mentions that his last batch of customers included 2 people who spent the following week in bed with stomach ailments. But he says this with the same tone he uses to discuss the weather. Food poisoning, apparently, is just another occupational hazard of Roman dining, like paying taxes or avoiding chariot traffic. The sanitation issues become apparent as you observe food preparation up close. The marble counters of the Thermopolia, which looked so clean and modern earlier, are actually breeding grounds for bacteria in Rome's warm climate. The dolia that keep food warm also keep it at the perfect temperature for bacterial growth. And the constant reuse of serving bowls without proper washing creates a perfect storm of contamination. You watch a vendor rinse a bowl in the same water he's been using all day, then immediately fill it with stew for the next customer. The Roman Empire might have conquered the world, but it's clearly losing the war against basic food safety. But the real dangers lurk in the ingredients themselves. The honey that makes Roman desserts so irresistible is often adulterated with cheaper sweeteners, including lead-based compounds that create a sweet taste while slowly poisoning consumers. The wine that flows so freely through Roman society is frequently enhanced with lead additives to improve flavor and prevent spoilage, creating a generation of Romans who are literally drinking themselves to death 1 cup at a time. The garum that seasons everything might be made from fish that's been left to ferment a little too long in the Mediterranean sun, creating toxins that would make modern food safety inspectors faint. Historians still argue whether Romans understood the connection between food contamination and illness, but the evidence suggests they knew something was wrong without understanding exactly what. You overhear conversations between vendors about which suppliers to avoid, which ingredients seem to make customers sick, and which preparation methods seem safer than others. It's empirical food safety without scientific understanding, trial and error on a citywide scale where the errors can be fatal. Lead poisoning situation is particularly insidious because it affects the wealthy more than the poor. Expensive wine is more likely to contain lead additives. Fine ceramics are more likely to be glazed with lead-based compounds, and elaborate food preparation often involves lead-lined vessels. You watch a wealthy merchant delicately sipping mulsum from a beautiful silver cup that's probably lined with lead, while a poor laborer drinks the same beverage from a simple clay vessel that's actually much safer. Irony, it seems, is a dish best served with a side of toxic metal poisoning. The spice trade, which seemed so exotic and wonderful earlier, reveals its dark side as you learn that many exotic seasonings are actually local herbs that have been artificially colored and flavored to resemble expensive imports. That cinnamon from Ceylon might actually be tree bark from the hills outside Rome, treated with dyes and aromatic oils to fool unsuspecting customers. The pepper from India could be crushed mustard seeds that have been blackened with soot. Even the legendary silphium is frequently counterfeited, with vendors selling ordinary herbs at extraordinary prices to customers who can't tell the difference. Food storage presents another set of challenges in Rome's warm climate and crowded urban environment. The grain that forms the basis of Roman bread is often infested with weevils, creating protein content that Romans probably don't want to think about too carefully. The olive oil that seems so pure and Mediterranean is frequently rancid, giving foods a bitter taste that Romans have learned to mask with heavy spicing. The cheese that appears in so many dishes is often made from milk that comes from cows, goats, or sheep that graze in areas contaminated with human waste, creating a direct pathway for disease transmission. The most dangerous dining decision turns out to be trusting the water supply. Even the vendors who claim to use purified water are drawing from sources that are contaminated by runoff from the city streets, sewers, and industrial activities. The famous Roman aqueducts bring clean water into the city, but by the time it reaches the street vendors, it's been contaminated by lead pipes, dirty storage containers, and the general chaos of urban life. You watch a vendor mix this questionable water with wine to create pasca, and realize that alcohol might be the only thing making Roman beverages safe to consume. The economic pressures that drive food contamination become apparent as you observe vendor behavior throughout the day. The profit margins on street food are razor thin, creating powerful incentives to cut corners on ingredient quality, preparation time, and sanitation practices. A vendor who spends extra money on fresh ingredients and proper cleaning might price himself out of the market, while his less scrupulous competitor thrives by serving cheaper, more dangerous food. It's a race to the bottom that's literally killing customers, but slowly enough that the connection isn't always obvious. Your exploration of Roman food dangers concludes with the sobering realization that the average Roman probably consumed more toxins in a week than a modern person encounters in a year. Lead from wine and cookware, bacteria from contaminated food and water, parasites from poorly prepared meat, and chemical adulterants from counterfeit spices created a perfect storm of health hazards. The fact that Roman civilization lasted as long as it did suggests either remarkable resilience or remarkable ignorance about the connection between diet and health. Probably both. You arrive at the Circus Maximus during the Ludi Romani, and immediately you're swept up in what can only be described as the ancient world's first food festival, where vendors have set up elaborate displays that transform the entire area into a massive outdoor banquet. The crowds are enormous, over 100,000 Romans packed into the circus and surrounding areas, and everyone seems to be eating constantly. This isn't just street food. It's a religious and civic obligation disguised as culinary entertainment, where sharing food demonstrates community solidarity and religious devotion, while also providing an excuse for citywide gluttony. The scale of the operation is breathtaking. Vendors have brought entire roasted pigs, lambs, and even a few oxen that are being carved directly from spits, while crowds wait in lines that stretch for blocks. The smoke from dozens of cooking fires creates a haze that hangs over the entire circus, while the mingled aromas of roasting meat, honey pastries, and spiced wine create an olfactory symphony that makes your mouth water and your head spin simultaneously. This is Roman excess at its finest, where the line between religious observance and competitive eating has been completely obliterated. But the real spectacle comes from the free food distributions that are part of the festival's religious obligations. Wealthy Romans and the government itself sponsor massive giveaways where thousands of libum cakes, honey pastries, and cups of mulsum are distributed to anyone who wants them. You watch as a line of Romans stretches around the circus, each person receiving a small feast that would normally cost several days' wages. The recipients aren't just poor Romans. Wealthy citizens participate too, creating a temporary suspension of economic hierarchies where everyone becomes equal in the face of free food. Historians still argue whether these food distributions were genuine religious expressions or calculated political manipulation, but the evidence suggests they were both simultaneously. You witness senators personally handing out honey cakes to their constituents, creating moments of political theater where food becomes a medium for vote buying and loyalty building. The recipients understand this perfectly, but participate anyway, creating a social contract where political support is exchanged for culinary largesse. Democracy, it seems, has always been at least partially about who provides the best snacks. The festival foods themselves are different from everyday street fare, larger, more elaborate, and designed to create memorable experiences rather than simply satisfy hunger. You try a placenta maxima, a massive layered pastry that's been constructed like edible architecture, with honey-soaked layers that require both hands and considerable commitment to consume. The vendor explains that this particular version contains ingredients from all corners of the empire: honey from Attica, cheese from Gaul, spices from India, and wine from Spain, making it an edible celebration of Roman conquest and trade. Religious aspects of festival eating reveal themselves as you observe the ritual offerings that precede each meal. Vendors pour wine onto the ground before serving customers. Small portions of food are set aside for the gods, and certain combinations of ingredients are considered sacred and must be prepared in specific ways. You watch as a priest blesses a massive batch of mulsum before it's distributed to the crowd, transforming ordinary street food into sacramental cuisine. The line between feeding the body and feeding the soul becomes increasingly blurred as the day progresses. The social dynamics of festival eating create temporary communities among strangers. You find yourself sharing a bench with a senator, a gladiator, and a freedman baker, all eating identical honey cakes and discussing the chariot races with equal enthusiasm. The shared experience of festival food creates bonds that transcend normal social boundaries, allowing conversations and interactions that would be impossible in everyday circumstances. A wealthy matron offers you a sip of her premium conditum paradoxum, while you share your roasted chickpeas with a group of children whose parents are somewhere in the crowd. As the day progresses, the competitive aspects of festival eating emerge. Vendors try to outdo each other with increasingly elaborate offerings. A baker creates a libum cake shaped like the Circus Maximus itself, complete with tiny sugar gladiators. A wine merchant offers a mixture that he claims contains spices from beyond the edges of the known world. A meat vendor roasts an entire wild boar that he claims was personally hunted by gladiators in the forests of Germania. The exaggeration is part of the entertainment, creating a carnival atmosphere where truth becomes less important than spectacle. The economic impact of festival eating is staggering. You learn that vendors save money all year to participate in these major festivals, knowing that a successful festival can provide enough income to support their families for months. The government spends enormous sums on food distributions, creating temporary economic stimulus that benefits everyone from grain farmers to spice merchants. Wealthy Romans compete to sponsor the most elaborate food offerings, turning generosity into a form of competitive display that benefits the entire community. But perhaps most fascinating is how festival eating creates cultural memory. You witness families passing down traditional recipes, sharing techniques that have been used for generations, and creating food-based traditions that will survive long after the Roman Empire falls. Children learn to associate certain flavors with religious celebrations, creating taste memories that will shape their cultural identity for life. An elderly woman teaches a young girl how to properly eat balsam-soaked bread, passing down not just technique, but cultural knowledge about community, celebration, and the proper relationship between food and faith. Your festival food exploration culminates as the sun sets and torches are lit throughout the circus, creating a magical atmosphere where food, religion, politics, and entertainment merge into a single, unforgettable experience. You realize you've witnessed something that goes far beyond mere eating. You've participated in the cultural DNA of Roman civilization, where food serves as the medium through which community identity is created, maintained, and celebrated. You return to the same thermopolium 6 months later, and immediately you notice that something fundamental has changed in Rome's food culture. The marble counter that was once laden with exotic offerings now displays a meager selection of basic items, and the cheerful vendor who used to regale customers with stories about spices from India now speaks in worried whispers about rising prices and uncertain supplies. The economic pressures that are slowly strangling the Roman Empire have begun to manifest in the most basic human necessity: food. The decline of Rome isn't just political or military, it's culinary. playing out one empty stomach at a time. The spice trade that once brought exotic flavors from the corners of the earth has become increasingly unreliable and expensive. The vendor explains that the last caravan from India was attacked by barbarians. The ships from Ceylon have stopped coming altogether, and even basic pepper now costs more than a skilled craftsman's daily wage. The conditum paradoxum that was once available to anyone willing to pay a few extra asses has become a luxury item reserved for the wealthy. While ordinary Romans make do with local herbs that pale in comparison to the exotic seasonings they've grown accustomed to. But the real crisis lies in the basic ingredients that form the foundation of Roman street food. The grain supply that once flowed reliably from Egypt and North Africa has become sporadic due to barbarian raids, corrupt officials, and the general breakdown of imperial administration. You watch as a baker apologetically explains to customers that his bread contains more barley and less wheat than usual, creating a coarser texture and different flavor that marks the decline of Roman baking standards. The free grain distributions that once kept the masses fed have been reduced, creating longer lines and smaller portions for increasingly desperate Romans. Historians still argue whether Rome's culinary decline was a cause or effect of broader imperial collapse, but the evidence suggests the relationship was cyclical. Economic problems reduced food quality, which weakened the population, which created more economic problems. You witness this firsthand as vendors struggle to maintain their businesses with inferior ingredients and fewer customers. A once thriving honey cake vendor now sells only on market days, while a spice merchant has converted half his stall to selling cheaper local products that lack the exotic appeal of his former offerings. The social dynamics of food consumption have shifted dramatically. The democratic mingling of classes that once characterized Roman street food has given way to more rigid segregation as resources become scarce. Wealthy Romans increasingly eat in private rather than mixing with the masses at public food stalls, while poor Romans compete more aggressively for access to affordable food. You observe arguments over prices, quality, and availability that would have been unthinkable during Rome's prosperous peak. The shared culinary culture that once unified the empire is fragmenting along economic lines. The quality of food preparation has declined along with ingredient availability. Vendors who once took pride in their craft now focus on volume and speed, serving more customers with less attention to flavor and presentation. The elaborate honey-wine combinations that once showcased Roman sophistication have been replaced by simpler mixtures that prioritize alcohol content over flavor complexity. Even the beloved garum has become more basic, made with cheaper fish and less elaborate fermentation processes that produce a product that's functional but far from the gourmet condiment it once was. The decline is perhaps most visible in the festival food distributions that once demonstrated Roman generosity and civic pride. The The massive free food giveaways have been reduced to smaller, less frequent events, while the quality of distributed food has dropped significantly. You attend a festival where the traditional honey cakes have been replaced by plain bread, and the mulsum has been watered down to the point where it's barely recognizable. The crowds are smaller, the atmosphere is subdued, and the sense of community celebration has been replaced by desperate competition for limited resources. But some vendors are adapting to the new reality with impressive entrepreneurship. You meet a former spice merchant who has learned to create exotic flavors using local ingredients, crushing herbs to mimic pepper, fermenting local plants to approximate garum, and using creative combinations to suggest the complex flavors that expensive imports once provided. His customers know these aren't authentic substitutes, but they're grateful for anything that reminds them of better times. Innovation born of necessity is creating a new kind of Roman cuisine that's less sophisticated but more sustainable. The psychological impact of culinary decline becomes apparent as you observe customer behavior throughout the day. Romans who once approached food vendors with confident expectations now ask tentative questions about prices and availability. The casual browsing that once characterized food shopping has been replaced by focused, efficient purchasing that suggests people are buying only what they absolutely need rather than what they want. The joy has gone out of Roman eating, replaced by anxiety and careful calculation. Economic pressures have also changed the vendor-customer relationship. The friendly banter and casual credit arrangements that once characterized food sales have given way to cash-only transactions and suspicion on both sides. Vendors worry about customers who can't pay, while customers worry about vendors who might disappear overnight, taking advance payments with them. The social trust that once lubricated Rome's food economy has been eroded by economic uncertainty. Your exploration of Rome's culinary decline concludes with the sobering realization that the collapse of civilization can be measured not just in political events or military defeats, but in the gradual disappearance of daily pleasures that once defined a culture. The exotic spices, elaborate preparations, and abundant variety that once marked Roman food superiority have given way to basic sustenance and creative substitution. Rome's citizens are still eating, but they're no longer dining, and the difference tells the story of an empire that's slowly forgetting how to feed its dreams along with its people. You step out of ancient Rome and into a modern Italian pizzeria, and suddenly the connections become overwhelmingly clear. The flatbread topped with cheese and herbs that you're eating is a direct descendant of the Roman focaccia that street vendors sold from portable ovens 2,000 years ago. The tomatoes might be a New World addition, but the concept of quick, portable, delicious food served to people on the go is pure Roman innovation. You realize that every food truck, every corner deli, every fast casual restaurant is essentially a modern thermopolium, serving the same human needs that Roman vendors satisfied with marble counters and clay dolia. The modern global spice trade that fills our supermarket shelves with flavors from around the world follows trade routes that Romans established when they first discovered that pepper from India could transform simple ingredients into extraordinary experiences. Remember that garum-obsessed vendor who introduced you to fermented fish sauce. His spiritual descendants are now running Korean taco trucks and ramen burger joints, proving that fusion cuisine isn't a millennial invention, it's a Roman legacy. The same economic principles that drove Roman merchants to risk everything for exotic seasonings now drive modern food companies to source vanilla from Madagascar, cinnamon from Ceylon, and saffron from Kashmir. Even the social dynamics of modern eating echo Roman patterns. The food halls that have become popular in major cities recreate the democratic mixing of classes that characterized Roman markets, where tech executives eat alongside construction workers, all united by their appreciation for good food served quickly and affordably. The modern concept of elevated street food, gourmet versions of traditionally simple dishes, mirrors how wealthy Romans transformed humble ingredients into sophisticated cuisine through careful preparation and exotic seasoning. You can almost hear that patrician matron who complained about street food being beneath her station, while secretly sending slaves to buy her favorite honey cakes. Historians still argue whether the Roman Empire fell or simply transformed into something else. But the evidence suggests that Roman food culture never really died. It evolved, adapted, and spread throughout the world like a delicious virus that infected every culture it encountered. The pasta that defines Italian cuisine uses techniques that Romans developed for making quick, portable grain-based foods. The wine culture that characterizes Mediterranean dining follows Roman models of pairing alcohol with food to create social experiences. Even the concept of the restaurant itself, a place where strangers gather to eat prepared food, is fundamentally Roman in its origins. The modern obsession with fusion cuisine has its roots in Roman kitchens, where cooks combined local ingredients with exotic spices to create new flavor profiles that reflected the empire's cultural diversity. Today's Korean Mexican tacos or Indian Chinese noodles follow the same innovative spirit that led Roman cooks to combine garum with honey, or to season chickpeas with spices from 3 different continents. The Romans understood that good food is about breaking boundaries and creating unexpected combinations that delight the palate and surprise the mind. The fast food industry that dominates modern eating is essentially a scaled-up version of Roman street food culture, complete with standardized recipes, efficient service, and portable convenience. McDonald's golden arches serve the same function as the painted signs that advertised Roman thermopolia, while drive-through windows are simply a mechanized version of the quick service that Roman vendors provided to customers who were too busy to linger over their meals. The only real difference is the technology. The human desire for quick, tasty, affordable food remains exactly the same. Though hopefully modern food safety standards mean you're less likely to find lead in your happy meal than Romans found in their libum cakes. Even our modern relationship with food safety echoes Roman experiences. The organic food movement, with its emphasis on pure ingredients and traditional preparation methods, represents a reaction against the same kinds of adulteration and contamination that plagued Roman food systems. The modern obsession with knowing where our food comes from and how it's prepared reflects lessons learned from societies that trusted their food suppliers and paid the price in health problems and economic exploitation. Remember those midnight market vendors who sold questionable meat under flickering oil lamps. They're the reason we now demand ingredient lists and expiration dates. The cocktail culture that defines modern nightlife follows Roman models of combining alcohol with flavors and spices to create complex beverages that serve as social lubricants and conversation starters. The craft beer movement's emphasis on unique ingredients and small batch production mirrors Roman approaches to winemaking, where individual producers developed signature flavors that reflected their personal style and local ingredients. The modern sommelier's expertise in food and wine pairings continues traditions that Roman mulsum vendors developed when they learned to match different wine mixtures with specific foods. As you walk through any modern city, you can see Roman influences everywhere. The corner deli that serves sandwiches to office workers recreates the Roman tradition of stuffing bread with whatever ingredients are available. The food trucks that follow construction sites and business districts echo the mobile vendors who followed Roman armies and crowds. The farmers' markets that celebrate local ingredients and traditional preparation methods reflect Roman values of connecting consumers directly with producers who take pride in their craft. But perhaps the most profound Roman legacy is the understanding that food is about more than nutrition. It's about community, culture, and connection. The modern tradition of sharing meals to celebrate important occasions, using food to express hospitality and affection, and gathering around tables to create bonds that transcend social differences, all reflect Roman insights about the social power of eating together. They understood that breaking bread with someone literally breaks down the barriers that separate us, creating temporary communities based on shared pleasure and mutual nourishment. Your journey through Roman food culture concludes with the recognition that every time you grab a quick lunch from a street vendor, share a drink with friends, or discover a new flavor that transports you to distant places, you're participating in traditions that began in the bustling markets of ancient Rome. The vendors may have changed, the ingredients may have evolved, and the technology may have advanced, but the fundamental human experiences of hunger, pleasure, community, and discovery remain exactly the same. In every bite of modern food, you can taste the echoes of Roman innovation, Roman ambition, and Roman understanding that good food is one of life's most reliable sources of joy. The street food paradise you explored still exists. It just looks different now, scattered across food courts and corner cafes, carried in delivery bags, and served from windows of converted vans. The thermopolia live on in every place where strangers gather to eat together, finding comfort in shared flavors and familiar rituals. The flavors fade slowly, like memories of a perfect meal, but the connections linger. The understanding that food is the thread that weaves through human history, connecting us across centuries and cultures through the simple, profound act of sharing what sustains us. In the end, perhaps that's the most Roman thing of all, the recognition that some pleasures are so fundamental to human experience that they transcend the rise and fall of empires, surviving in every kitchen, every meal, every moment when strangers become friends over the shared appreciation of something delicious. The Roman Empire may have fallen, but Roman food culture conquered the world so completely that we barely notice its presence in our daily lives until we pause, like we have tonight, to trace the flavors back to their source and discover that every meal is a small act of historical reenactment, every bite a connection to the past. Sleep well, knowing that tomorrow's breakfast connects you to centuries of human ingenuity and appetite. The ancient Romans understood something we're still learning: that the best journeys begin and end with good food shared with good company.